stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives, cannot be repeated often enough. But it should not be trotted out as a substitute for answering reasonable questions. Otherwise, people might think ministers' main concern is stay on message, protect your backside, save your job. We've come to accept that sometimes the politicians don't always answer the questions put to them. And sometimes as listeners, we get cross with the politicians. Sometimes we get cross with the interviewers too. Journalists, and I certainly include myself in this failing, don't always ask the right questions, or don't follow up when they should, or they follow up too much. It's far from perfect. I'm guilty of all that. What happens in normal times is that when we hear that sort of stuff going on, we shout at the radio at stupid questions or useless answers, and then we move on. But these are not normal times. These nightly Downing Street question and answer sessions are the only guaranteed regular occasion in the whole day when the UK gets to hear what the government is thinking. Listeners have told me on the air just last week that they're cooped up at home all day, and for better or worse, they look forward to those Downing Street briefings. They find them really crucial. There are so many important things we want to know about. Not just the lockdown, but PPE, testing, herd immunity, death rates, care homes, ventilators, political leadership, hospital capacity, and more. So, when questions are not answered, it's no longer just about shouting at the radio. It's much more important. It is about our health, our fears, our anxieties. It's important those are taken seriously by the people who are answering the questions. And last Friday, that did not happen. On Friday, it was the Business Secretary, Alok Sharma, who was in charge. In his opening scripted remarks, he thanked each and every person across the UK who was following and supporting the government's advice to stay at home. And he wanted to pay heartfelt tribute to all the scientists and researchers. And who could argue with any of that? Certainly not me. But what happened when the questions began? Emma Hutchinson from ITV Anglia asked something inspired by what another government minister had said on Friday.
Can I ask about the tourism industry? This morning, the Transport Secretary said he wouldn't be booking a summer holiday. In the east of England, the tourism industry is worth £7.5 billion. Can you offer any hope to that industry that there will be some kind of summer season this year?
Fair question. Alok Sharma's response did not address the question about offering hope for the existence of a summer season.
The first thing I want to say is that I speak to businesses and business representative organisations every day, and I know how tough it is for a lot of businesses. That is why we have put in place the measures that we have in terms of supporting businesses, and particularly in terms of hospitality and leisure and retail. As you know, those businesses have a business rates holiday for a year. And in fact, for smaller businesses within those sectors, they're going to get a grant, and many of them have started to receive a grant of £25,000 as well.
Gordon Rayner from the Daily Telegraph was next, asking about the future.
You told the CBI earlier today that businesses and employees would have to get used to a new normal and that things won't go back to the way they were even when the lockdown is lifted. Can you explain what you mean by new normal? And are you saying that some restrictions will have to stay in place until there's a vaccine, which, as Sir Patrick says, is a long way off?
That's an interesting question, and you might expect Alok Sharma to be interested in answering it because he himself had raised the idea of a new normal. Earlier on Friday, at an online question and answer session with the business organisation, the CBI, he brought up, twice, without prompting, that term, new normal. Not surprising then that later, at the live Downing Street briefing on Friday night, Gordon Rayner from The Telegraph would want to know more about Alok Sharma's self-described new normal. Here again is the question, this time with the answer.
You told the CBI earlier today that businesses and employees would have to get used to a new normal and that things won't go back to the way they were even when the lockdown is lifted. Can you explain what you mean by new normal? And are you saying that some restrictions will have to stay in place until there's a vaccine, which, as Sir Patrick says, is a long way off?
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about in terms of the workplace. We've been very clear that we are asking people to stay at home to protect the NHS and save lives, and very large numbers of our population are doing that. And we've also said in terms of work is that if you're able to work from home, you must absolutely do that, and employers are supporting people to do that, and I think that's very, very welcome. There are certain work settings, so you may be in the manufacturing sector or indeed the construction sector, where it is not possible to work from home and you have to go in. And what we have said is that in those circumstances, people can go into work. However, it's also incumbent on employers to make sure that they're following the Public Health England guidance in terms of working safely in the workplace. And certainly the conversations that I have had with employers, with employer organisations, I know that is what they're doing, they're adapting, and that's what I mean about the fact that where there is a work setting and people and those workplaces are open and people are going to work, we have to adapt the way that we are working, so we do that in a safe way and keeping employees safe.
As you heard, no explanation there of what new normal might be. Instead, Alok Sharma repeated the government's guidance to us all: stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. Gordon Rayner from The Telegraph was perplexed.
I don't quite understand whether what you're saying is that you expect people to carry on working from home until there's a vaccine, or whether you're saying that you expect people to go back to work normally but just to have social distancing.
No, well, let me clarify, and I apologise if I've not been clear on this.
To be clear, that's Alok Sharma apologising if he'd not been clear. And to be even clearer, he wasn't clear. He was asked whether in future people would have to stay at home until there was a vaccine. His response again was not to answer. He chose instead to repeat the government's guidance to us all: stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
The measures that have been put in place were renewed yesterday, and we have made very clear that the message to the public is, for at least the next 3 weeks, follow the guidance that we put out, which is you must stay at home. It is about protecting the NHS, and ultimately it's about saving the lives of individuals as well.
Joshua Mortimer from Left Foot Forward had a question about NHS staff.
As you know, care workers and NHS staff are putting their lives on the line each and every day to get us through this crisis. Was it a mistake for your government to brand those people as low-skilled labour?
Before we hear the response, a bit of background information. In February, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, announced the government's post-Brexit immigration controls. Anyone earning less than £25,000 a year would be deemed an unskilled worker and not allowed to enter the UK. As was pointed out at the time, many starting salaries in the NHS are below that 25,000 threshold, the level officially deemed by the government to be unskilled. Nurses, 24,000. Paramedics, 24,000. Midwives, 24,000. Radiographers, 24,000. Care assistants, 17,000. I mentioned a moment ago that in Alok Sharma's scripted remarks, he expressed his heartfelt thanks to lots of people and paid tribute to others. As the questions continued on Friday from journalists, Alok Sharma often did not directly respond, choosing instead again to express his heartfelt thanks like a drunken Oscar winner. The question from Joshua Mortimer had been this: was it a mistake for your government to brand these people as low-skilled labour? Here's the response.
I want to pay tribute, and I think you will find that absolutely everyone in government is absolutely united on this. We want to pay tribute to the selfless work that is going on across the NHS, across the social care sector, the way actually the whole country is coming together to deal with this particular issue. We need to make sure that we provide support to those who are supporting us, and that's why you've seen the work that has been going on in terms of testing, in terms of making sure that PPE gets to the front line, and we will continue to do that. I want to be very clear on this, is that the NHS workers are absolutely vital to us. We support them because they support us, and I'm very grateful for absolutely everything that they do.
Clearly, if heartfelt tributes were hard cash, the low-skilled workers of the NHS would be millionaires. In his follow-up question, Joshua Mortimer pointed out that many care workers were on minimum wage. Would Alok Sharma commit to ensuring they would get full pay and full sick pay? Alok Sharma completely ignored the question about carers and chose to talk instead about testing and schemes for private business, including furloughing.
Firstly, can I say just in terms of testing, so we've had 66,000 NHS staff and social care staff and their families who've been through the testing process. When it comes to making sure that support is provided, there's a whole range of support that we've provided to individuals and businesses, particularly in terms of the furlough schemes, in terms of grants. So we will continue to provide that support. And we've also said when it comes to statutory sick pay, of course, we will support smaller businesses as well for a 2-week period. So there is a lot that I think the government has done, but I want to be absolutely clear with you, Josh, is that we very much value the heroes that we have across our country within the NHS and, of course, in the social care sector as well, and we will continue to do that.
No answer to the question of whether they would get full pay and full sick pay. The final question at Friday's news conference went to Peter Madley from the Express and Star.
We've seen forecasts of the damage that coronavirus is going to do to the UK economy. Bearing in mind that the Treasury's coffers are being emptied out at the moment and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future, why are you proceeding with HS2, which is a conservative estimate it's going to cost more than £100 billion? Would it not be prudent to at least suspend work on the project while the country tries to get back on its feet?
How did Alok Sharma respond? You'll be shocked to know he didn't even mention HS2. Instead, the Business Secretary decided this was the moment to pay tribute to people who are working from home.
Well, Peter, I think firstly, I want to pay tribute to the businesses that are working, that are carrying on, the people who are working from home, those who are going into work settings where they can't work from home. And I think it's really important we do everything we can to keep the economy going. But you're right, there is a major impact on our economy.
And with that, it was almost over. Time and again, faced with questions about pay for NHS staff and carers, questions about government spending, about the collapse of tourism, about explaining his own definition of new normal, Alok Sharma chose to fall back on thanking people, paying tribute, and repeating the government's advice. I agree we should thank everyone who's making sacrifices right now, and we can't pay tribute enough to everyone who's working hard to keep the country going. But thanks and tributes should not be trotted out as a substitute for answering reasonable questions. Otherwise, people might begin to doubt the sincerity of the thanks and tributes. Here's how Alok Sharma ended his news briefing on Friday.
I want to thank everyone for what they're doing. So please continue to follow the very clear advice the government has set out, which is stay at home, protect the NHS, because ultimately this is about saving your life and the life of someone you love. Thank you so much.
I agree that the message, stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives, cannot be repeated often enough. But it should not be trotted out as a substitute for answering reasonable questions. Otherwise, people might think ministers' main concern is stay on message, protect your backside, save your job. Let me know what you think.